In front of me, ladies, I can see about 8 players today that we've got wind of that will not be with the Jaguars unless they end up being on the practice squad. I'll start with the one that I believe all 3 of us had on our 53 yesterday, and that would be safety Terrell Edmonds.
Yeah, and got a little bit more intel from a couple different people yesterday on that front. And the report from, I believe it was Adam Schefter that broke the news about Terrell Edmonds, or maybe it was Ian Rappaport. Whoever it was noted the Jaguars are optimistic that they hopefully can get him back to the practice squad as a vested veteran. And I think that is a practice you're going to see across the National Football League more and more. This idea of those 16 players on your practice squad, 3 to 4 of them being guys who don't have to go through the waiver wire process because they have more than 4 years of service in the National Football League. And in turn, those guys understand, hey, I may not be on the 53, but in case of emergency or injury, I'm among the first to get called up. Last year, you saw that with Tavon Campbell, who was released by the Jaguars on Sunday. But last year, he filled that position at the corner in the cornerback room.
And Gotsis has done that before, too.
Adam Gotsis as well. And I do think, the tight end position last year was a little bit different. It was Josh Peterson, who was not a vested veteran, but filled that role of, hey, we're only carrying X amount on the 53. And so, therefore, you are literally the next man up should something happen.
Yeah, and so as we were talking about that, because even yesterday when we were going through our depth charts, I had mentioned I was going back and forth with Edmonds anyways, and ended up keeping him on, which I was on the fence. So to me, that wasn't a super shocking one just because I already was like, I can definitely see him not making, just because I think when you're looking at having those starting 4 safeties and then getting a couple back in 6 weeks, maybe they feel like they have enough there to just get through those first 5-6 weeks without having an Edmonds on the team. And so that one wasn't a total shocker, but it was one of the ones that we did have on our depth charts.
Well, I think there's a reason for that, and that's because when we saw him in the preseason games, he was a hard hitter. He knew, where he needed to be throughout both training camp and those 3 games. And he seemed like maybe they needed a veteran presence in that safety room because those guys are a little bit younger. But at the end of the day, like Mia said, they want him back on practice squad according to, and I think it was Rappaport earlier today. And so that's one of the ones. Cornerback Amani Oruwariye. I don't think that's as much of a surprise. But some other cornerbacks, Trey Flowers, another veteran in there. I'm not super surprised about that. But Christian Braswell, Mia, that one definitely surprised me.
Yeah, that one's a surprise, and I'm still working to confirm that personally, only because we've only heard it from one individual so far. Only one outlet has reported that, which for a guy who was slated to start on the depth chart is fascinating that the Adam Schefters and Ian Rappaports of the world wouldn't have it. That's with all due respect to Adam Kaplan of PFN 365. But I do find it interesting that we're only hearing that from one source.
I thought that too.
Yeah, so we're going to monitor that one. I personally am doing plenty of digging on that one, and so we will keep you posted on that one because I think that one's interesting because then if you look at the Jaguars' defensive back room, if you were to release or to waive Christian Braswell, you're really only going to carry 5?
Yeah.
Like, that's questionable to me.
And the other interesting part is, in my head, I was like, well, maybe they're talking about using Savage in that corner room, which we've talked about. But then also, if you're getting rid of another safety like Edmonds, then you're losing Savage in the safety room, too. So it is a bunch of interesting moves when it comes to the secondary. But, yeah, he was on my roster hands down. So that one definitely was a little surprising for me and disappointing. I think he had a fantastic preseason, and I was really excited about Braswell.
Yeah, the first depth chart that they posted had Christian Braswell as the starting nickel. And so that's where, not that we necessarily thought that's what would really happen.
Right. He also didn't play against the Falcons. And from what I remember Doug saying, that was precautionary after the oblique injury he suffered against the Bucs week 2. But even then, it was kind of just like, it's just precautionary, which if a guy's fighting for a roster spot, you're not typically then turning around and, like, not playing them, because you want to see something from them. So I don't know. The whole thing is fascinating.
Or want other people to see something from
them. Right,
exactly.
The whole thing is fascinating to me. So that was the only one that I saw, and like from my intel and reporting, I was like, I'm gonna wait till we see the official, roster at 4:00 on that front. But the rest of them, I mean, and thank you to Big Cat Country, our good friend Travis, and of course our very own Gus Logue, who also moonlights, or rather, he's the editor, I should say, of Big Cat Country over there. They have a great roster cut tracker going right now. We knew about the 10 cuts from earlier in the week on Sunday. Tom Pelissero also reporting Tanner Muse, the veteran safety/linebacker, another potential veteran practice squad candidate. Eric Hallett, according to Aaron Wilson of KPRC out in Houston. Per my own reporting, Josh Proctor waived by the team earlier this morning, the safety/linebacker by way of Ohio State. And then
Joe Gaziano.
Yeah,
When it was
we just
reported
got
it was
another one.
Joe
Okay.
Graziano.
Okay, but I've also butchered that one like 17 times. I mean, look, you can't help it. There's a lot of
Graziano
It does
just
sound
rolled
like
off
Graziano,
tongue.
yeah.
Graziano. We've known Dan forever, so here we are.
Well, at the end of the day, more will obviously be rolling in. They are due today at 4 p.m., and I'm sure throughout the course of the show, we will continue to bring you more of these as they're announced. And look, this team, we've talked about it for a few weeks now. It was going to be difficult for certain guys like a Trey Flowers, like a Terrell Edmonds to make because they've been journeymen to this point in their careers. And because this staff has basically told us, outside of a few positions, we want our homegrown guys to be able to be the next wave of depth at certain positions.
Yeah, they want the homegrown, and they also have, and this is on both sides of the ball, they've gotten so many guys that can play so many different positions, and that especially defensively, Ryan Nielsen loves the guys that you can move around. And so I don't think that, I think they do want to build from here, but I think also they want guys that they know can move around and play multiple spots. And maybe some of those guys that don't have that versatility aren't going to make it in a Ryan Nielsen defense.
Yeah, two of those guys that come to my mind, Darnell Savage, who you just talked about, Taylor, can play both nickel, can play safety, and Antonio Johnson, same exact thing. He can play both of those positions as well. And so how does all of that factor into what their decisions were? And because Ryan Nielsen's new to this staff, I wonder too, how much did he get to weigh in, or did Doug and Trent really get to decide? And we'll meet with them later today and get some of those answers.
I mean, historically speaking, and I understand there are those of you who, Trent Baalke could find the cure for cancer, and you would not support any of his decisions. And
the fact that there are still clown emojis is a little surprising with how successful the team's been, but that's neither here nor there.
But even if you go back to his time in San Francisco, which I understand, it ended with a lot of friction with Jim Harbaugh. However, he consistently has a track record of going to coaches and saying, who do you like? Who do you need? Let us try to find a spot for them, and working in harmony with them. That goes back to the time in San Francisco. I've seen it and heard firsthand that he has done that here in Jacksonville. And so, yes, if you are seeing a player be released or a player who gets brought in, 9 times out of 10, there is a consultation with the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I think that I mentioned this in the offseason, early in the offseason, when we were saying, what does Trent Baalke have to do for people, to the ones that truly hate him, to not hate him anymore? And I will stand by this. I don't think it's going to happen by some offseason moves without seeing those offseason moves on the field and you winning a couple playoff games. I just think that's going to be the standard he's going to be held at, especially because of what Trevor Lawrence is supposed to be and because of the way that the team was supposed to look last season. And I just think that some people are going to hold on to that until the last very second. And then maybe if they win, they win a couple playoff games, and some of these draft picks that haven't worked, maybe like a Brenton Strange and some of these other guys flash and we see moments, then people may start being like, okay, like there's still some bad moves, but there's a lot of good things that have been done. But I do think it's going to take something like that to shift some people.
It has to be frustrating as the general manager to put you and your scouts, and you put so much time and effort into researching these guys and watching their college tapes and talking to so many people that surround their lives. And then like a Tank Bigsby, we'll take him for example. And you know how talented he is. Mm-hmm. And then a few missteps happen, whether it's the fumbles or the issue on special teams. And then all of a sudden the coaching staff no longer puts him on the field. Yeah. And you've sat here and you've studied him for so long, and you know how explosive he is, and you know how he can, be that downhill runner for you. And you know that Travis Etienne's hurt, and yet he still stays on the bench. That has to be frustrating.
Yes. Yes. Very.
Yeah, and I mean, that's conversations can be had. I mean, it's not like Baalke's going to run down there and be like, put this guy in the game, but there are situations, there are involved GMs around the league that do have more say in certain things of whether, like, we need to see more of this guy, we need to see this guy on the field, this person's not working. And I don't know that relationship as well. I'm not in the building as much as someone like Mia, so I don't know what that relationship looks like. I can't say that he is or isn't doing that, but there's definitely probably moments where it seems like it's not so much. He is, kind of more behind the scenes than actually making the on-field decisions.
And I will say, for training camp purposes, he's out on the field every single day. I would assume that's the same at practice too, but he seems to be someone who is very hands-on. It's just once you get into the season, especially when you are 8-3, at that point in time, it's probably like a hands-off approach because everything's going well. And then when things start to fall apart, well, then it was a little too late.
Well, you give the players to the coaches. And at that juncture, outside of fortifying probably that bottom third of the roster, what else can you really do?
Yeah. Well, you hired these people. So you also want to...
the coaching staff, technically, that's the 50-50 split, right? Between Doug and Trent and Shad, yes.
But a lot of these are your people that you've had conversations with and that you and Doug have agreed you want to be coaching your team in some way. So I think at some of it, you want them to be successful, obviously, but you also want to say, I trust you enough, I hired you to be able to take over this. And like you said, Lauren, when they are 8-3, there's probably a moment where he was like, heck yeah, like everything's working out the way it was supposed to work out. And then when things drastically started to shift and get worse and you had to afterwards fire your whole defensive staff, and at the end of the season, there's a lot of question marks. And I'm sure for Trent, too, a lot of these things kind of boil down. That's not just players, but that's also the play calling and other coaching factors. And so all of that is on his plate. And so it is a lot to kind of have to evaluate every single year all over again, not to mention the coaches that go get hired other places, and then you have to replace them also.
All right, so let's run through all of the transactions. Jaguars PR just posted this moments ago. We begin with the players who have been waived. Sean Bowman, Christian Braswell, indeed waived by the Jaguars. Gary Brightwell, Joshua Cephas. Guess I won't be talking to him because DJ Coleman, among those who has been waived. Elijah Cooks, Eric Hallett, Jalen Jackson, Stephen Jones, EJ Perry, Josh Proctor, Austin Trammell, Daryl Williams. They also waived injured Patrick Murtaugh. That's an interesting situation because he is part of the International Pathway Program, so hopefully we'll get further clarification from the Jags on that front shortly. They also released the following veterans who are not subject to waivers. Adrian Amos, who we just told you moments ago. Tight end Josiah DeGuara. Terrell Edmonds, Trey Flowers, Joe Gaziano. As I just reported about 30 seconds before the Jags tweeted, Blake Hance released by the Jaguars. Tanner Muse, Amani Uruware, and cue the smallest violin, RJ. Tyler Shatley released by the Jacksonville Jaguars. 4 other transactions I want to get to. The Jaguars did release C.J. Beathard via injury settlement. That one is definitely going to be another one to monitor because that means he has the right to go and sign with another team. Would he want to stay with the Jaguars and be that quarterback on the practice squad? I don't know. Have not spoken to anyone in his camp, but it is certainly something worth monitoring. As many of us expected, the Jaguars did place both rookie running back Keelan Robinson and safety Andrew Wingard on reserve IR, but with the designation to return, which means they would both be eligible to be activated week 5. And finally, the team placed Tashawn Gibson on the reserve suspended list.
So this, I think, means that my guy Esezi Otumaweo might make the team.
He is on the team, Lauren. We
Right?
have the 53-man roster.
So
I have it in front of me right now.
I said yesterday I wanted him on it. I didn't put him on it. I had DJ Coleman there instead because thanks to Doug Peterson's press conference. And when he mentioned Miles Coleman, mentioned DJ Coleman, he didn't mention Esezi. And now I wish I had put him on there, which means he made it.
He has made the team, as has Miles Cole. Gosh, this print is really tiny. It's making my eyes hurt. I'm just kidding. Yes, he has made the team. So Miles Cole, Esezi, Tyler Lacey are among the 10, it appears, 10 defensive linemen that the Jaguars have kept on their 53-man roster. On the offensive line, they also are keeping 10. Javon Foster has made the team. Cole Van Lannon as well. Walker Little, Cam Robinson, Brandon Scherf, Mitch Morse, all the usual suspects. Cooper Hodges, Ezra Cleveland, Anton Harrison, and yes, Luke Fortner. The team is also keeping 6 inside linebackers, at least as of this writing. Foye Oluwakin, Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller, Yasir Abdullah, Caleb Johnson. And then the interesting one, they actually list the defensive backs together, the safeties and the corners. So Andre Sisco, Darnell Savage, Daniel Thomas, and Antonio Johnson. So those are your 4 safeties. But then you have Jarian Jones, DeAndre Prince, Ronald Darby, Buster Brown, and Tyson Campbell. So only 5 corners being kept right now on the 53-man roster, which that for me, from the onset of the Christian Braswell report, was most interesting.
Yeah.
Because I guess the hope is you're going to get some of these guys on the practice squad and be able to call them up as needed. But that was an interesting one for me.
So on my offense, as I'm looking at my roster projection, I had every single person on the 53 on my offense correct. But my defense is where I messed up because I had DJ Coleman. I did not have Tyler Lacey. I had Christian Braswell. I did not have Monteric Brown, and I had Terrell Edmonds.
And as I noted, too, Elijah Cooks waived by the Jaguars today. Tim Jones is wide receiver 6 on the depth chart, and that is a 3rd straight season that the former undrafted free agent out of Southern Miss has made the Jaguars' active roster. Hey, Mia here, and thanks so much for watching 1010XL Jaguars. For even more coverage of the Big Cats, be sure to subscribe to 1010XL Jaguars.